Good morning, Year 12. Thank you for what looked like very, very good exams that have taken place over the last 2 weeks. I'm really sorry I can't be with you this morning, but we've got some interviews taking place for some new members of staff, which I'm part of. So today's lesson, we're going to continue with our research on Sport England and Sport England's national partners. And we're going to be looking at continuing to look at the processes that are involved with socialisation within society and using sport for creating social change. Now, you will have all received an email yesterday on your school email addresses with your physiology results out 35. You can please access those that test now, and you can start to have a look at your answers compared to the mark scheme for that particular test in preparation for tomorrow's lesson. Your sport sociology and sport in society exam will go through in our lesson later on in the week rather than tomorrow's lesson. Please let me know if you haven't had an email. The feedback is available so that you can go through that exam and have a look at what your answers were like compared to the mark scheme. Now, just be aware, when you do look at some of your answers, you're going to see red crosses next to your answer. Actually, what you're looking for is not necessarily the red cross, unless it's got 0 marks attached to it. It's actually the marks for each question. So you might see a red cross next to a 4-mark question, but you've been allocated 3 marks. So it's the marks that are really, really important for you when you're looking at it. It's just a bit of a thing with the Google Forms. When you start to put paragraph answers or long answers down, unless you put the exact wording, you won't get the green tick next to it. I have actually marked all of your individual answers. So that's what you're going to see when you start to go through those exam papers. So let's just to remind ourselves where we're at to in this sociological process. We have for some time now been looking at these 3 learning objectives of identification of the role of Sport England, understanding its schemes, its processes, its links to local partners. Remember that active county programme, active Sussex, active Hampshire, etc. And its links to national partners. And we've been looking at a number of the national partners. We need to apply our knowledge of the specific schemes. So we have to know for each of the national partners what they do and the types of programs that they run. And then finally, our 3rd learning objective, and it's always in green, our 3rd one is analyse, discuss, evaluate the role that Sport England has with its national partners in increasing participation. Has it been a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What has the impact been like over time? And we're very lucky in a way that we're constantly at the moment in our society being bombarded by these social change issues. We've seen a campaign take place in the last month or so, Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter is not just about sport, it's about the whole of society and the way in which we treat one another. We've just had Pride weeks taking place as well, and Pride have not jumped on the back of Black Lives Matter, but All Lives Matter, and this campaign that every individual needs to have representation within our society. So it is topical at the moment. It is something that we need to be aware of. And there's lots and lots of links that keep this interesting and exciting for us. The one big question is this question at the bottom of the page. How does Sport England work with their local and national partners to try and increase participation in sport and physical activity for underrepresented groups? So keep that in mind the whole time. So at the end of the last lesson, I asked you to go away and I asked you to research these 2 different groups within our society. And they're 2 national partners that are linked to Sport England. The first group is called the Activity Alliance, And it's got a subheading, Disability Inclusion Sport. This used to be known as the English Federation for Disability Sport. And what you should have gone away is you've gone away and you've looked at their website, you've looked at the programs that they have in place. Now, the Activity Alliance works really, really carefully with the Active Lives program to ensure that people with disabilities have equality and equity of provision. Too often we just think about accessibility when we think about disability sports. Oh, is there a disabled ramp? Is there a disabled lift? Is there a bigger toilet that has wheelchair access? But it's not just about the accessibility. It's about coaching knowledge. It's about coaches being available. It's about specialist equipment being available. It's about inclusivity in terms of enabling someone with a disability to still have access to sport or recreational activities. Now, I mentioned last time around the sport of boccia, and I said to you that you're very lucky in terms of you've got a head of sixth form, Mr. Saunders, who's actually got a son who is due to be at the Tokyo 2021 Olympics. Feels weird saying that, 2020 Olympics, 2021 Olympics. He's actually only a year older than yourselves, and he's made that national squad in boccia. Now, boccia is a sport that can be played with all sorts of abilities or disabilities, if you like, and we can actually mix people in order to play that game. It's a fantastic game for allowing equity of play and enabling everyone to be inclusively involved. We think about some of the other activities that we now see on a disability sport front, and one of the ones that's become quite popular because of its links to the armed forces is wheelchair rugby. It's often known as murder ball as well. Extremely, extremely violent in terms of the way that these guys will hit each other in their wheelchairs, but very, very popular as well. And when I think about the Activity Alliance, I think particularly about Prince Harry's link to Invictus and the Invictus program. And I think really the Invictus program, along with the London 2012 Games, has been massive for disability sport. It's been a huge thing. It's really brought disability sport onto mainstream television, into the mainstream public eye. So the Activity Alliance, we need to know about these programs, and we need to have visited this particular site. So we've got three national partners that I'd like you to go away from today's lesson to research, exactly the same as we have done in previous lessons. And these are partners 6, 7 and 8 of our 10 national partners that we need to know about from Sport England. And the three national partners that I'd like you to go away and research today, who they are, who do they affect, what is the impact of their programs, are SportsAid, UK Coaching, and the Sport and Recreational Alliance. That's SportsAid, UK Coaching, and the Sport and Recreational Alliance. And remember, it's your job to know for next lesson, for the next sociological lesson that we have, what the impact of these groups are and what they do within society. Who do they impact, and what are the big national programs that they run? Now, in order to help you out with this, this particular week, what I'd like you to do is visit our frog page. So we're going to our impact of sport on society on our frog page. And here we go straight away. Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Really, really important. Quote that in terms of considering sport and as a way of creating social change. Education, probably the most important factor. The two articles that I'd like you to have a look at are these two articles here. So the first one is called Active England, and the Active England article I'll show you in a moment. And the second one is called Sport and Social Change. So there's two articles there to look at. So the Active England one should be quite a quick read for you because it's a summary of what's going on. Now, active England, active Sussex, active Hampshire, active Kent, active Surrey. These are county partnership level groups. Now, this particular article, you can see there, it's only 4 paragraphs long, talks about Sport England's mission to creating an active England. Let's always remember, please, that Sport England is about grassroots sport. The participation, the bottom of the participation pyramid in terms of sport. This is about getting masses active, masses of people doing things. So everything that we've been studying to do with Sport England is about trying to access the masses. Now, this particular article talks about 2 particular programs that run as part of this Active Nation program, which is goodgym.org and silverfit.org. And this is all about getting people doing things on a regular basis. I mean, I could throw into the mix there straight away PE with Joe, because PE with Joe during this time that we've been in lockdown, I think has been an incredibly important thing in terms of getting the nation active. And Sport England will have loved PE with Joe. Probably wouldn't have loved the fact that the numbers have gone down from 975,000 live views a day to less than 100,000 live views per day. But it will have loved the fact that this is all about getting lots and lots of people active in one go. So our second particular article that will take you a few more minutes to read, because it's not so much about Active England, is about sport and social change. And that's a refresh on what's going on. Using sport to bring about social change. Now, remember, this idea of social change is very much about creating good habits within our society. Can we get people off benefits? Can we get people out of the NHS system? Can we enable people to fend for themselves and rather than live off benefits? All of these things are this idea about developing our society and making our society a much, much better place. So that article there, using sport to bring about social change, that's probably about a 4 to 5 minute read. And the other one, which is Active England, I think you could probably do in less than 2 minutes. So 2 important articles just to say where we're at. Now, I'll go back to today's presentation. I'd like to think about disability sport. So we part of our homework was to find out about this activity alliance, this disability activity alliance. Key points about disability is we need to define what the impairment is. Now, for me, there are 2 different types of disability. There's mental disability, which is covered by the Special Olympics, and then there is physical disability, which is often covered by the Paralympics, or in fact the Invictus Games, because that's become really, really important with our society, not only for creating role models, but for creating an event which is massive in terms of media coverage and almost make disability sport become an everyday thing for us. Joe Public, we're able to just see what's going on, and we accept disabilities far more easily. The definition of impairment within sport comes at different levels. So if we think about the various different impairments that we could have, it could come from something like muscular sclerosis, which is this idea of not being able to use certain muscles within our bodies, and we've got muscular wastage or muscular dystrophy taking place within our body. It could come from a whole limb being removed, or limbs. It could come from a spinal injury where we lose all ability to use our legs or lose all ability to use our arms. It could even come from issues such as dwarfism. Special Olympics can cover physical disabilities, but it tends to more cover mental disability. So athletes who maybe have Down syndrome, or have some sort of issue at birth where they might be suffer from a mental impairment and they're unable to do things physically for themselves, or unable to process information, they tend to compete at the Special Olympics. And Paralympic tend to be for those that have a disability, a physical disability of some kind, not just the idea of mental disability. Now, I understand both systems because I have a sister who has Down syndrome and also has that physical disability, and she's actually the winner of the first medal at the Portsmouth Special Olympics in the year 2000. So I had the pleasure of watching her compete in the swimming pool there. And it's fascinating to see what goes on. But it's also fascinating to see that disability sport can be abused. And I can remember at the Special Olympics, there was a Special Olympic basketball tournament that took place, and it was supposed to be for athletes who had some type of mental impairment. And the Spanish team basically sent their full national team basketball squad to that particular games. They ended up winning a medal, was subsequently banned afterwards when it turned out actually there was nothing wrong with any of their players. Perhaps the governing body should have been the group that should have been competing there, as they were the ones that made the decision to send them. But that's another story altogether. The other thing that can happen quite often with disability sport is that disability sport, rather than just being about drug use, someone who's a paraplegic can actually deliberately break their bones or do things to themselves to release adrenaline into their systems. And adrenaline will have that positive effect of improving performance. So it's not unknown for a wheelchair bound athlete to break their toes and dislocate their toes, or take a hammer to a part of their body that they can't feel in order to get adrenaline released and cause a problem. So the very different impairments and the very different nature of what goes on means that the disability types and the different disability categories are very, very complex in nature. And you will now see often events that take place where there's actually 3 or 4 impairments in one race all at the same time. And that's in order to try to make it more interesting for the spectators and more easy to understand. So that's what we call the profiling system. And it is difficult. The profiling system can be difficult for spectators. It can also be difficult for athletes because they can find that they cross categories the more they go on. Either their disability becomes more severe, or in some cases, their disability becomes less severe. One particular athlete who is very, very high profile in this country is the sprinter Sophie Hahn. And Sophie Hahn is the world record holder. Brilliant sprinter. She has muscular dystrophy, I think, of some kind. It's said that she can't run the 200 meters because she'd fall over. That's what she commonly says. She can only run in a straight line, which is interesting. But there's been lots and lots of controversy about Sophie Hahn and what she's able to do and what she's not able to do. And there is a big rivalry with another British athlete whose father is actually on the Paralympic panel for Wales, and he has tried to get Sophie Hahn recategorised on several occasions, saying that her disability isn't as severe as the category that she competes in. So there are all sorts of issues that we need to be aware of within society. The other thing that happens within Special Olympics is, unlike Paralympics, is in Special Olympics, the athletes are often categorised by their personal bests. And so they can be put in races with people with different disabilities, but the person who wins the race is the person who beats or gets closest to beating their personal best time without absolutely smashing it. And that sounds a bit odd, but just imagine that your 100-meter time was 10 seconds. The protocol for Special Olympics means that you can only be within 5% of your personal best in terms of beating it. So it would be acceptable to set a time of 9.5 seconds for the athlete, and that would be count as, yes, you've broken your PB. But if you were to do 9.49 seconds, which is greater than 5% of the time, then actually what you're going to do is you're going to get disqualified from the race. that's quite controversial in itself. So be aware of that when we're thinking about sport and we're thinking about what goes on. Now, I've just got a brief video for you to watch. Sorry, just bear with me a moment. I've just got to rewind that video.
Right now to provide hearing impaired sports persons competing in the Olympics with a level playing field. Sounds pretty reasonable to me. There's Emma O'Sullivan.
Don't be fooled by his athletic build. Sekou Kane is just 11 years old. The Brisbane schoolboy made it to the National School Sport Championships last month. Because he can't hear the starting gun in a race, he campaigned and eventually won the right to be allowed a hand signal.
I was in the 4x100 metres relay. I came first. The second event was the 200 metres. I came second, which I have a medal for.
Sekou had to fight for a fairer start because world track and field rules don't allow assistance for deaf athletes. Former Vice President of the International Olympic Committee, Kevin Gosper, believes Sekou's case deserves international attention.
I happen to be the patron of Sports Australia. I'll take this matter back into the Olympic meeting that I go to next and talk about this case. And the sports director, the Olympic sports director of the movement, is conscious of this event now.
At the Olympics, deaf swimmers are allowed a flashing light at the start line so they don't lose valuable time. To demonstrate, we've highlighted the discreet light seen here underneath South African Terence Parkin at the Sydney Games.
Silver goes to Parkin of South Africa.
Other sports not so. It's not that they're insensitive, but they've not sort of faced up to the issue.
Former basketballer Sam Quinn has also kept an eye on Sekou's case.
It's a great outcome, it really is, and he's inspiring as well. I mean, an 11-year-old to be assertive, to make sure they get the assistance they needed.
Sam has represented Australia in 3 Deaf Olympics, and through sheer determination, he's also played on local hearing teams throughout his career.
I've seen a few things happening over the time. A lot of deaf people don't necessarily have the confidence. And there's that perception that deaf people can't be part of a team sport. So I think we should be encouraged to be part of it.
After all, those who can't hear are just as able-bodied as those who can.
We have pride in ourselves, and I get so inspired when I see deaf people participating in the Olympics. I think in the future it'd be great to see more and more deaf athletes being part of mainstream sport.
Athletics Australia declined to speak on camera, but the organisation said it will consider putting the Fair Start issue on the agenda at its next international meeting with more than 200 other sporting federations.
It doesn't take much equipment or format variation. That's the key to it.
While Sekou is likely to have a light at the starting line next time he qualifies for championships, change at Olympic level will take a little longer.
Rose Sullivan there. Next up, the author who tips a feminist bucket on the man who's turned wearing budgie smugglers into a police.
So we're thinking there particularly about the issue of disability within sport, and what's quite fascinating there is seeing that this young athlete from Australia, he feels discriminated against because his disability doesn't allow him to compete in a particular event. Now I can think particularly about the likes of Oscar Pistorius, who was a South African runner called the Blade Runner. He's quite controversial in another matter because he's actually been imprisoned now for murdering his girlfriend. But Oscar Pistorius was an athlete who tried to get himself into the Olympic Games to compete against able-bodied athletes. And that's something that's coming more and more to the forefront now in terms of disability sport. Now, we need to recognise why participation is particularly low for disability athletes. So it's not just about accessibility to buildings. Accessibility, this idea of ramps, of equipment, etc., is a big part of it, and it's very inconsistent. But it can be other issues as well. I think accessibility is the one thing from experience that students tend to focus on, that accessibility thing. But other things that I want you to particularly think about is the fact that some people can't participate with a disability. We simply don't have the expertise or the coaching experience in place to show them how to take part. The other thing is about the support and the offer that's put into place. Yeah, do we have enough different specialist facilities in order for someone to not have to travel too far to take part in a particular activity? It's very, very easy to categorize groups and ignore them within society. Do people with disabilities have a voice? Do they have someone who stands up for them? We've got the Equal Opportunities Act that go through Parliament and try to give people a voice, but sometimes the voice can be interesting. And I'm speaking from experience here with a sister with Down syndrome that I've talked about before. The big voice in terms of social services are that someone with a disability, they should be allowed all the rights of someone without a disability, and they should go and live by themselves, and they should live in the community, stuff like that. And my sister actually went to live in the community, and her weight ballooned because she wasn't properly monitored, and she wasn't really looked after, because the idea was, it's all about independent living. Now, actually, my parents then stepped in, and she moved back with my parents and was able to control everything again. But just by giving someone that independence, it doesn't mean that necessarily we're giving them the knowledge or the support to look after themselves. And that's something that we have to bear in mind. People are different. People have different needs. How do we support them? A lack of consensus on the best way to provide opportunities. Let me give you an educational point of view from this one. Should someone with a disability be in mainstream education, inclusive education, or should they be in exclusive education, a separate school? My sister came through an education system where she was sent to a different school that was away, a special school that was away from mainstream education. So St Anthony's is an example of a special school, rather than a unit within a school. So the Bourne has a unit within the school that allow youngsters to be inclusive and come in the same way. And there are arguments for and against both different approaches, the exclusivity approach and the inclusivity approach. We need to think about that. The lack of role models or status for role models is perhaps a big thing. When I think about disability athletes, when I think about Paralympians, the two females that stand out for me would be Dame Tanni Grey-Thompson, because I came through an era where I saw Dame Tanni Grey compete on many, many occasions in her wheelchair. But the other one that springs to mind from recent Olympic Games is Ellie Simmonds, who suffers from dwarfism. Or in fact, no, it would be wrong for me to say suffers. That's a really bad word to use, because I don't know that Ellie would ever say she suffers from it. She has it. She lives with it. So dwarfism coming to the forefront there. But do we have, and are those role models given the right status within society? And that's something we need to really address and think about when we're thinking about this evaluation, this discussion question to do with disability sport. The next group that I want us to think about is a group that's impacted by one of the three different areas, or one of the three different groups that I asked you to study for your homework today. Okay, and this is about socioeconomic background. Now, socioeconomic classification is incredibly complex. We could just say upper, middle, lower class, but it's not as simple as that, because there are arguments for there being classes within classes. We know that middle class could involve those who have independent education and those who have state education. That lower classes include those who work but get benefits and those who work but get no benefits. Who is better off within that category? I think I would argue to you that someone who comes with benefits actually has a head start on someone who is very low income that doesn't have disposable income to spend on extra stuff. And we need to be aware that we're almost missing a group within our society when we're thinking about sport and we're thinking about the activity of sport in sport. Participation is down amongst lower socioeconomic groups because there is less disposable income. Yes, there's a spelling error on the page. Disposable, D-I-S-P-O-S-A-B-L-E, not A-L-B-E. Disposable income. Please note that, write that down right. Disposable income. Disposable income is defined as the extra money that we have that isn't used to pay our bills. Now, disposable income can be affected by lots of different things. So rent is the big thing. That's the thing that we all have the right to be able to pay. But one of the big areas within society has been things like the loan people, the loan sharks that have come along. There was a huge thing within football a few years ago where these loan companies were lending out money and were sponsors of particular clubs. So I can think of Wonga.com as an example. And I'm pretty sure Wonga were the sponsors of Newcastle for a long time, Newcastle United. And they're actually banned from doing it because we actually saw that as being a bad thing within society. Similarly, actually, to cigarette companies and tobacco companies. And we'll see the same thing with alcohol and sport advertisement coming in. But that's another topic altogether. Discrimination amongst classes can be a huge thing as well. Now, we might turn around and we might say discrimination is about the middle or upper class towards the lower class. Yeah, it can be. But actually, discrimination can quite often happen within the class itself. So let's think about the film Billy Elliot. The film Billy Elliot was all about this working class boy who fell in love with dance as a physical activity, as a sport. But actually, the group that discriminated against Billy Elliot the most was his own peers and his own friends, those that came from his own group. You sissy, you Nancy boy, you're gay, you're dancing. That type of thing, that type of approach. So the discrimination can often be from our own peer groups, from the people within our own class. We can also self-discriminate. I don't want to do that because I might look like something that I'm not. I'm not sure that I want to take on that challenge. So be aware of that. When I think about the development of sport, the big thing that we talked about within society when we talked about that rationalised recreation and popular recreation was that the upper classes and the middle classes had time to do rationalised recreation. They didn't work as much as the working class. And it's exactly the same thing when we think about socioeconomic background now, that someone from a lower socioeconomic background may be working 2 or 3 jobs in order to have enough income to pay their bills. And once you start working more than 40 hours a week, your disposable time becomes far less, and therefore you're not able to participate in sport as much as before. So being aware that we have less time is incredibly important when we're thinking about sport and we're thinking about those backgrounds. A recap then on your homework today: you need to go away and you need to research Sports Aid, you need to research UK coaching, and you need to research the Sport and Recreational Alliance. So 3 different groups. You've also been sent your physiological paper for yourselves to look at. Please have a look at that before tomorrow's lesson. Any questions, you know where to email me, brownt@bishopluffer.org.uk. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.